Hello. I play quite a lot of games, and I've played quite a lot of roguelikes, but I've never made one myself. Every year, around this kind of time, about February, March sort of time, there is the 7-day roguelike challenge, which is, exactly as it sounds, a challenge to create a new roguelike game in 7 days. I've never participated before because I'm not a programmer, I know nothing about game design, but this year I've been approached and persuaded to collaborate on one with someone who does know a bit more about that stuff than I do. So I'm coming in on kind of a co-design slash writing, setting creation kind of thing. And I'm going to try and record vlog entries during the course of the week to document how it's going, particularly since I'm a first timer. Hopefully it might be interesting or at least entertaining for some people. I doubt I'll have time to edit and upload them during the week because there'll be more pressing demands on my time. But I will try to get some recorded, at least a couple. This one is right at the very beginning of the challenge. We're on the brink of the start of 7DRL for 2015. So we haven't actually started on the game yet, but we've done some design document stuff. And I've been working on sort of the geography of the setting and that kind of thing. So I just want to document what it is that I've got at this point. We've discussed some design stuff, but what I have down solidly for the creation of our world is this. This was meant to be an attempt at mapping. I was going to draw a basic map showing how locations fit together and where they are in relation to each other, but I can't create like that. I sat down in front of the blank page and went, I could draw a square here and point it to this square of it. What are they? That one could be a forest. I don't know. I can't create like that. I create while writing. So I had to sit down and start writing about this world, and it created itself as I wrote it. So this is what I have so far. Very, very beginning of 7DRL 2015. Here we go. And the reason I'm going to read the whole of what I've written so far is because there's a good chance that none of it will make it into the game, because that's not what it's for. We do intend to have some text in the game, but not all of this stuff. But, you know, it's there. You'll probably never see it, but it's right here. So I might as well read it to you, and maybe you'll get some sense of what was behind the world creation at this early stage. So this is what I have. It was a strange land, a haunted land, pocked by remnants of an empire long since fallen, and a succession of petty, grasping kingdoms which strove to recreate it. If viewed from the loftiest peak of the looming western mountain range on a clear day, the land would spread erratically beneath you like a carelessly discarded blanket, once treasured but now neglected and retained only for the sake of sentiment. Crumpled fields lay in disconsolate heaps around the foothills, divided into a garish patchwork of thinly populated agricultural holdings. The foothills themselves scowled stonily at this human encroachment, pushing with apathetic resentment against the incremental incursion of houses and farmyards. Beyond lay the land proper. The civilized folk there were mistrustful of the strange, sultry farmers and herders who clustered around the feet of the mountains. The few who ventured from the heartlands out to the west returned telling stories of eerie, chill winds that rolled like phantom avalanches down off the heights, wailing faintly with the voices of the lost and abandoned. The locals scoffed at such tales, of course, but there was always a hint of shadow in their eyes as they did so, as though their scorn was a well-worn defence against the fears that swarm those mountain tops. No wonder, then, that the Heartland folk seldom venture out to the west. Their own part of the land is warmer, softer, if a little more frayed. It was the core of the empire in those long-gone but coveted days, and the remnants of imperial decadence and folly still cling to every edifice. Even the landscape has a sort of delicate poise, crags which seem almost smoothed by a cultured caress, streams which don't babble coarsely but enunciate their liquid poetry with precision and elegance. There's a lethargy and an indolence to the Heartland. The people born and raised there generally consider themselves the inheritors of true civilization. But apathy has a barbarism of its own, and the self-aggrandizing pomp of the old imperial core is only a thin veneer over a series of ever less impressive regimes, each seeking to drive closer to the imperial ideal, yet each bleaker and baser than the last. The slide into disorder is slow and well hidden, but inexorable. Still, for the lover of architecture, this remains the centre. The grandeur of the old structures is mostly gone, but there's a uniform dignity to the homes here. Unlike the rough, haphazard shacks of the far west, the former imperial heartland is a solid and measured reminder that people once tamed the land. The land, however, began to fight back. Between the tousled agriculture of the rough west and the listless smugness of the heartland lies the grand, gloomy sweep of Westaway forestland. In times of yore, the books say, this area was a wide plain called Westar Gate, so named for the gargantuan stone arch and towering wooden doors which marked the western exit from the Empire's defensible centre and the route out into the more loosely regulated outer regions. So vast were those gateway doors that rumour held it had taken 100,000 trees to build just one of them. So long did it take to construct, people murmured, that the original craftsmen got only part way through the task and had to pass their labour on to their apprentices, who were themselves elderly by the time the gate was finished. And the entire task was undertaken on ropes and pulleys. The Empire wanted their grand project to be visible to all, so the gates were built in position, right there on the hinges, hanging inside the arch. Many was the local braggart, who claimed some distant ancestor had been born and raised on the ropes, and eventually died there too, hammer still in hand. At some point after the Empire's collapse, however, the gate experienced one of its own. Now all that remains is a pair of vast stone stumps, thrusting like the horns of a resentful elderly beast through the smothering fabric of the forest. How the forest had spread so quickly, none could explain. No one really knew when Westar Gate had shifted from plains to shadowy woodland. Some claimed it was poetic justice. The trees come to take vengeance for their countless fallen comrades used to construct the great doors. Whatever the case, the colossal twin prongs of the broken Westar Gate arch seemed to loom overhead even from miles away, a constant reminder of the futility of pride, or a welcome sign of home for those returning east. The gate itself may be long gone, buried somewhere beneath the verdant canopy, but the route out to the west remains, and Westaway forestland marks the boundary that most civilized folk will not cross. The other side is different. Where the Empire and all subsequent realms flinched slightly from the western lands, they had all sprawled indulgently into the east. Mines and quarries dance a staccato rhythm into the southeastern peninsula. The earth there is saturated with minerals which provide the undeniable wealth of every ruler to date, and the excavation projects have only grown generation on generation. It was in this tapering peninsula's early scattershot mining efforts that humanity had discovered the various burrowers, races non-human but not totally unlike human, which lived beneath the soil, within the rock. Some assumed they were simply tunnelling species, living in caverns and narrow passages like humanity's own mines. Others were more superstitious. They were convinced that the burrowers lived actually in the rock, passing through it like ink spreading through water, and occasionally emerging into the uncomfortable environment of air where the humans lived. Even now there are those who talk in snide whispers of the burrowers breathing earth, drinking diamond and absorbing clay through the odd gill-like apertures on the backs of their heads. In truth, no one is entirely certain. No human has ever reported convincingly having entered the burrower's home territory, and the burrowers themselves are a private and reticent people. This very reticence also makes identification difficult. The term burrowers is mostly used to refer to all those sentient or seemingly sentient creatures found dwelling by choice under or in the ground. Yet different people have different groupings within that term. The Western folk tend to consider the burrowers two broad types, languins and showwins. The formers are spindly and agile, fast on their feet and their hands. The latter are a curious, hunched type. They have wide heads and long noses, and they're taller than the languins by half an arm, but they move with a ponderous slowness which frustrates miners trying to work with them. These are the categories the Westermen place on the burrowers, but the Westermen are the ones furthest from the burrowers' home, and they know them least. Some elsewhere in the land subdivide the burrowers into as many as 9 types, some of which even have subcategories of their own. Again, the burrowers opt not to discuss it. In time, humanity has mostly come to accept this, and the human miners live alongside the burrowers for the most part. Occasionally, a particularly gregarious burrower might even join in a human mining operation. At the far tip of the peninsula, the land rises towards a high sea cliff, grey and dour on its seaward side, and barely more welcoming on the landward. Only a few miles wide by this point, the peninsula is essentially uninhabited. The minerals are fewer and thinner out here, the land unsuitable for farming except by the truly desperate, and the height of the cliff means that even access to the sea is a troublesome ordeal, so fishermen too opt to avoid much activity here. From time to time, an enterprising smuggler tries to establish a stash in one of the shallow caves in the cliff face, but the continual bombardment of icy spray is like chilled needles, and even the deepest cave is barely an arm's length deep and provides no shelter. It is a poor location even for a smuggler's trove. Along one short stretch of the sea cliff on the southern side, facing only the wide, fierce ocean, and with the stern grey stone of the cliffs pressing at its back, sits a tiny strand of barely usable land. Perhaps half a mile or less of rough, scrubby earth, and a patch of gritty sand marked only by a single battered structure, a small wooden house. Few are those who pass along the far southern side of the peninsula by sea, and those who do would have to spare more than a passing glance to notice anything out of the ordinary. One solitary person chooses to scratch a tough living here. A handful of weak vegetables grasp for meagre life in the thin soil, and a badly scarred fishing boat large enough for one lonely fisherman has been dragged onto the beach. Though deserted for the moment, something in the angle of the splintered mast suggests despondency. The whole meagre homestead seems like a display of resignation, a reluctant concession to the need to survive on the fringes of the world where not even the lost will tread. Heavy footprints in the wet sand lead up to the loosely fitting door, and inside, into your house, to you. I wrote that in about an hour, just off the top of my head, and that is what I have for setting and world building so far. As I mentioned, I was meant to be drawing a map, but I can't just create like that. I can't look at a blank page and go, okay, I'm going to stick a forest here, there's going to be a city here. I have to describe it. That's when it comes out. So right now, the very first moments of 2015's 7-day roguelike challenge, that is what I have. That's my world building to date. So, watch out for these vlogs going up probably after the challenge is over, including this one. I doubt I'm going to get this edited and uploaded before the end of the challenge, but it'll be interesting to see how my point of view changes and how the content of the game changes as we go along. So keep your eyes peeled for that. And wish me luck. Bye for now.